Hello everyone, welcome back to FinMeUp. Today we are once again privileged to have Stefano Marani on the FinMeUp channels. And earlier today, this is Monday, the time of the recording, we asked on our FinMeUp social media if you have any questions that you'd like to ask Stefano, the CEO of Renergen. So today we'll be covering those questions and just get straight to the answers. So hopefully you get a lot of knowledge and insights into Renergen and everything you need to understand about the company and the potential. So getting into the first question, and that is, please ask him on the main takeaways that he got from attending the Helium Conference in Texas.
That's a good question, and thank you for having me. So I think the primary takeaways on the supply side, and the demand side, the MRI market is growing despite the new technologies using alternative forms of semiconductor and managing to recycle a lot of the helium. The fact is that the old MRIs are just going into the emerging market, so you don't have a diminishing pool of helium demand. So the net effect is that the MRI market is still growing. The semiconductor market is growing at a rapid rate of knots. After the chip crisis out of Taiwan at the end of last year, and in fact the whole way through COVID, Biden has more recently said that he wants to see a lot more semiconductors being manufactured in the borders of the United States. And this is a case of 1 + 1 = 3. So we've seen huge amounts more helium demand coming from semiconductor manufacturing. And that's anticipated to grow somewhere around 15% year on year for a while. Same as the space exploration market. This, I think, has been the dark horse that no one really predicted. But with all of these rockets taking off, the anticipated growth for helium required in rocketry is completely off the charts. Now, to put it in context, one big rocket uses 2 trailer loads for one launch. Now, let's just put that in context. Just think about a petrol station. A petrol station will use a 38,000 liter tanker of petrol between 1 and 3 days. So now think of how many petrol stations there are in a town, in a city. Think of how many cities. Now just think about how many tankers of petrol are consumed per day around the world as a global commodity. To put it into context, helium uses 16 containers per day. That's it. That's the whole market. That is an $8 billion per annum industry. 16 containers. Every rocket launch uses 2. And these rockets are going up every couple of days. So that market has been completely underestimated. I think I left the conference completely flawed from that perspective.
Yeah, that's huge.
On the supplies, it's enormous. It's absolutely enormous. On the supply side, interesting takeaways. And it started to play out, and we saw the news breaking over the course of the week last week and then over the weekend. Qatar's new plant is going to be delayed until 2025. The Russian Amur plant, massive challenges ahead, enormous, almost insurmountable challenges. The BLM is in crisis. You've got a lot of the Midwest producers in the United States starting to curtail. Hugoton is coming off in 2023. So our helium crisis 3.0 is now probably helium crisis 3.0 squared. That was the main takeaway from the conference.
Yeah, that's big. I mean, even the semiconductor industry is one I follow with this massive demand for semiconductors. So, and people need to ramp it up. The entire industry needs to ramp it up. So then on to our next question.
On that point, look at the index. I've just got to try and remember now. There's a semiconductor index on the NASDAQ. I think it's PHLX or something like that. If you look at that semiconductor index and look at the fall off in that index, literally 2 days after the BLM collapsed and the semiconductor industry wasn't getting its allocations of helium from the BLM. That's a sign of things to come.
Interesting. Then on to our next question. How many shares does he have on Renergen, and is he still investing in Renergen? So that is public knowledge. So yeah, I would love to hear.
Yeah, so you can see that on you can see that in the annual report. My shares are held in a company called MATC, and I hold about 8.9 million shares in Renergen. You'll see I've never sold; I've only ever been a buyer. Renergen represents 99.999% of my wealth, and I'm fully invested in all in, and it's just been a hell of a ride.
That's always
if you buy me a
yeah.
And if you buy me a beer one day, I'll tell you what MATC stands for.
Yeah, like, cause my mind was a bit spinning there, but that's great to see. Skin in the game is always good to see. That probably brings me to the next question, which is a very big question, and obviously, I think what the answer to your question will be. But the question is, does he think realistically that Renergen can become a world leader in the helium gas supply?
Absolutely. We are the other silverback in the room. Yeah, from a geological standpoint, from every which way you look at it. If you look at a lot of the emerging helium players, most of them have plans to produce gaseous helium. We took the view that if you're going to do it, you do it properly and you produce liquid helium. Gaseous helium trades at a massive discount. I think the biggest difference between our business model and almost everyone else's is that the upstream producers don't participate in midstream and downstream. The midstream and downstream producers, the six that control the world, there's literally the six companies out there that control 98% of world helium trade. None of those has access to upstream. Our plans in phase 2, along with the token, puts us squarely into upstream, midstream, and downstream, and that's the big differentiator. So absolutely, beyond a question in my mind, we're not only going to be upstream, we're also going to be participating in the midstream and the downstream. It's like, we're coming.
Yeah, that's awesome. How much capital will Renergen need from shareholders in order to commercialize phase 2?
So that we've been fairly public with, and even in our updated reserve statement last year, we said that we were going to be coming to the markets raising capital. Now, the way that we do that will be through a combination of debt and equity and the tokens. How much what the split is between debt and equity, we're obviously, we're busy working through the mechanics. I can't give that answer, but the total check size is somewhere between 8 and 900 million US.
Okay, and that brings me to the helium token question. What is the update on the helium token sales on Organon? When does he anticipate to have all tokens sold?
So we're using the tokens as an actual method of trading tokens in the secondary market. So once phase 2 is actually producing, tokens will be bought and they will be sold, and they will actually be used as a mechanism. The blockchain is actually very powerful in that regard. So it's not like there's ever going to be a situation where there are no more tokens, because we're using it as a way of invoicing and selling with customers. In terms of the timing on bringing it to market, we are crossing the T's and dotting the I's. We want the launch to be hyper successful. And so now I'm pleased to say, aside from just BitGet, we're also putting it onto PancakeSwap. We've got dedicated market makers. And obviously with the events over the last 7 days, I mean, anecdotally, we had people calling us up over the weekend saying, could they get a trailer load of helium at 2,000 US per MCF? So it's, the market is ripe. The timing has been great. So watch this space, probably about 3 to 4 weeks time. Then we should have all the T's crossed and all the I's dotted, at which point you'll start to see the ARGIs trading on those two exchanges. And then we've been approached by 1 or 2 other exchanges that are also interested on there. So yeah, it should be, for all intent and purposes, we're expecting a very successful launch.
Okay, interesting. And then a question I think many investors have, especially in a company like yourself with a lot of growth and still early, if you look at the bigger picture, do you plan on paying dividends?
Good. Absolutely. With the number of shares that I have, my primary focus is to pay dividends, because I'm not selling shares for my wealth. I want to live on these dividends. So yeah, absolutely.
Is
Myself
there
and Nick's interests are completely aligned with shareholders in that respect.
is there like an estimated time or years? Obviously, it's a big picture and a long-term game.
So I think once phase 2 is online, that'll be the point where the company then starts paying dividends. And at this stage, we're anticipating that phase 2 will be coming online somewhere between 24 and 25, and thereafter, then I mean, let's put it this way: the beauty about gas projects is that the capex upfront is heavy, and the investment upfront is heavy. But then once you've made that investment, then your only real costs, your only input costs are staff and maintenance. Phase 2 is self-powering, so you're not even paying for power. In fact, we're selling power into the grid in phase 2, which means that you've got this upfront cost, and once that burden is done, then you just got free cash flow. So we're fully aligned in terms of paying dividends.
Awesome. So there was a few questions on, I don't know if I pronounce it correctly, Cryovac, but just general updates on Cryovac. So, what's the demand been for that, and how's that been going?
So in South Africa, we use South Africa as a test case for Cryovac. I think we were responsible for vaccinating somewhere around about 1 million people with Cryovac in South Africa, so that was pretty cool. We used this as a field trial along with the Western Cape government and Coari, and like I said, it proved itself to be vastly superior to any of the other forms out there. Obviously, COVID has started to slow down a little bit now. This wasn't really primarily designed as a one-trick pony. There are bigger problems in the emerging markets, so Africa, India, South America, not just with regards to COVID, but with regards to the distribution of all vaccines. So we took last year, we slowed down the projections and the rollout. We took last year to get the product right and get the product field tested, because as amazing as it was in the laboratory, we discovered that in the field, people don't actually treat it with care. And so there's a lot of finicky little bits that were breaking that we needed to strengthen. So now the thing is working and it's field ready. We're now in discussions with several of the major players overseas, and it's a work in progress. I'm still massively optimistic that this is going to be a very, very big part of the portfolio, because we are cheaper than dry ice and we've got all of these additional advantages. So yeah, it still remains one of the key focus areas for the business.
Yeah, so back to the distribution part and your plans to partner globally. What are some of the big contracts that you've have in the pipeline, or anything you can discuss or share about those details?
With regards to the helium/LNG business or the Cryovac business?
Generally for Renergen.
Or in general. Okay, so unfortunately, until contracts have actually been signed and announced, that all remains private-side information. I can't disclose the progress that we're making with various offtake agreements. Suffice it to say that on the LNG side domestically, the allocation for phase 1 is pretty much done. There's probably 1 or 2 announcements left in the coming weeks. With regards to the LNG side, obviously the helium is already done. And then the next major offtake agreements that we'll be announcing for phase 2 is on the LNG side. On the helium side, we're not selling anything more. What's there is there. What's allocated has been allocated, and we're leaving 35% for the spot market, which is the very, very lucrative side of it. With regards to just generally speaking, the partnerships globally and on the distribution side, the distribution of it is pretty much a well-oiled machine. So moving it around, the key thing for moving helium around is having access to the trailers. And this is something that we've been working very hard on managing to get our hands on. So part of the CapEx number for phase 2 actually includes our own fleet of mobile units to be able to participate in the midstream and downstream, which makes us which differentiates us enormously from a lot of the upstream players who don't have their own fleets.
Very interesting. So then getting to the end and closer to the end, what is the total? I mean, the helium, we all know it's extremely important for all of us. But how would you define, so what is the total addressable market if it is definable?
So I suppose the total addressable market would be, it's one of those things that the more of it that you can produce, the more of it the world is going to consume. There's a portion of the market that is completely inelastic. So in other words, launching a rocket, the cost of the helium that goes into launching a rocket relative to all of the other costs associated with putting a rocket into the air, it really doesn't make that much of a difference. Same with the semiconductor industry. So those are two industries that it doesn't matter whether it's $500, $1,000, or $10,000 per MCF. They're not going to wean off their consumption. The markets that are most impacted by pricing are the balloon market and the welding market. At this stage, with current pricing, even at current pricing, those markets are still alive and healthy. I think if the world had a situation where it was an oversupply, you might see the prices come down, but it's not like consumption would stop. It's one of those commodities where the more of it that you produce, the more of it the world will consume. And we kind of saw a similar thing in the lithium market. The only thing that's going to happen is that you'll have a price decrease. But in our case, we see that price decrease not coming from the upstream producers, but more from the middlemen who are moving it around and making obscene margins at the expense of end customers. So I think that this is the time for the upstream producers now.
Okay. Estimation of how long before the helium spot market will be globally recognized?
That is a very, very, very difficult question to answer. Obviously, with the ARGI, we're going to make strides, and hopefully it gets adopted by a few participants and used as part of their research. At least that's certainly our intention. Whether they use it just anecdotally or whether it actually gets used as a true reflection of where the spot market is remains to be seen. But it is a very, very clandestine, cloak and dagger little commodity for many reasons. I think its use, the disproportionately large amount of helium that gets used in defense, means that as a commodity, it's not like coal or iron, let's say. There are a lot of reasons that the commodity trades the way the commodity trades. So I don't think that you're going to see a Platts helium price, with a ticker showing updates every 5 seconds like some of the other commodities. We're just doing our part to try and bring some education and transparency into the market with the ARGIs and everything that we do.
Awesome. Then the last question: what is the end game for Renergen? Do they intend being sold off to a global player or not? So just to elaborate further on the question, it's probably, is it to sell it off later, or is it just to build a massive business for the next 30, 40 years that's paying dividends, that grows revenues year on year? So I think that's, the 2 parts.
So as management, Nick and I are in this for the long term, and we love our jobs, and we're building a business, and we're going to produce helium, and we're going to revolutionize the helium market and the LNG market in South Africa. That is what we're here to do. Will it get bought out by someone else? That is for shareholders to decide. Management doesn't decide that. That's shareholders to vote on. Whilst Nick and I have a 15% vote between the two of us, that's not to say that we'd be able to swing it one way or the other. That's above our pay grade. But we're not going anywhere.
Yeah, and just a bonus question. So obviously you've got massive plans in South Africa, and a lot is happening here. How does the plans look, for your global expansion and the rest of those plans? Any
So,
specific details?
Mhm. So globally, expansion globally from a distribution perspective, that is absolutely, that goes without saying. As the business starts to grow, we will definitely expand our footprint from a distribution and sales perspective. With regards to increasing the resource base by taking on additional, let's call it helium resources overseas, that would just be a stupid move, because there is no other field on the planet that has the kind of concentrations that we do. And our P reserves, the proven reserves, only represent 14% of our production right in the Free State. And we have 100% of our production right. So expansion overseas would be completely nonsensical when it's cheapest for us just to develop our field, which incidentally has a grade that is so many hundreds of times better than anyone else's. There's no point. There's more than enough over here for us to really become a dominant global player.
Oh, that makes sense. Thanks so much for sharing all this knowledge and answering the questions straight on. Thank you for everyone watching till the end. Let us know, if you have any further questions in the comments, or any value that you got from this. Please consider liking and subscribing. It helps this channel reach more people. Also check the links in the description. We have interviewed Stefano 2 times previously, so you can get more knowledge on Renergen there. Have a great day. Thanks so much for joining, Stefano.
Thank you very much.